Real stories, real people.
I worked as a 911 dispatcher in Mobile, Alabama, for almost a decade. Most nights were routine domestic disputes, car wrecks, medical calls. Hard, but familiar. When Hurricane Katrina hit, everything we knew about normal broke. Our center started getting overflow calls from Louisiana and Mississippi as their systems went down. Lines lit up non-stop, voices blurred together, panic, wind, water, people begging for boats that didn't exist yet. I'd trained for mass casualty events, but not for an entire city flooding in real time while I sat in a chair with a headset on. Late that day, I took a call that still sits with me. The screen showed an out-of-area number. When I answered, a woman's voice came through, calm but strained. She gave an address I didn't recognize somewhere in New Orleans. At first, I thought she'd misdialed. I double-checked our maps and couldn't find her street anywhere near Mobile. When I asked what city she was in, she said quietly, "New Orleans. I think my house is going under." In that moment, the distance between us felt huge and completely meaningless. She explained that water had already filled most of the first floor of her small one-story house. It was creeping higher, inch by inch. She couldn't open the front door because of the pressure, and the windows were already underwater. She had no boat, no life jacket, just a phone and whatever was in reach. I asked if she had an attic. She did. I told her to grab water, food, anything useful, and climb up there while she still could. She actually laughed softly and said, "Guess it's a good time to clean out the fridge anyway." We stayed on the line as she moved around. I could hear dishes clinking, drawers opening, the splash of water against her legs. She narrated what she was doing so I wouldn't think the call had dropped. "I've got some bottles, some canned stuff, chips from last night," she said. I told her she was doing great, that moving now was the right call. When she pulled the attic door down, I heard the ladder creak. The water was at her waist by then. I asked about neighbors. "Most of them left," she said. "I stayed for my parents' house." Once she was in the attic, things got quieter. The sound of sloshing disappeared, replaced by hollow echoes and her breathing. I asked if there were any attic windows or vents big enough to crawl through. She said no, just solid roof and a small metal vent. I told her to rest a minute, drink some water, and keep the phone close. We tried transferring her to New Orleans 911 and the fire department, but every route we attempted failed. Circuits were overloaded or dead. We were her only connection, from another state, with no physical way to reach her. After a while, her voice changed. The calm started to crack. "The floor's wet," she said. "It's coming through the boards." I hadn't expected that. Neither of us had. The water outside had risen high enough to seep up into the attic. I asked if she could find something heavy, a crowbar, hammer, anything to break through the roof or the vent. She rummaged around, grunting with effort as she swung at the wood. The sounds got weaker. Finally, she came back to the phone. "I can't break it," she whispered. "It's too solid. I can't get through." The water rose to her ankles, then higher. She described it matter-of-factly at first, then with more fear. She alternated between joking, praying, and cursing the storm. I told her I would stay on the line as long as the call held. "I don't want to die alone," she said once, very quietly. I told her she wasn't alone, not really that I was there with her, even if it was through a wire and a headset. It felt like an inadequate thing to say, but it was all I had to offer while watching blinking lights on a console. At some point, her breathing grew shorter. She said the water was up to her chest now. I could hear it sloshing as she shifted, trying to keep her phone dry. I asked if she could float on debris, anything to keep her head near the rafters. She tried to describe the attic to me so I could picture it: old trunks, boxes of Christmas decorations, a suitcase her mother once used. As she talked, I heard her voice dip underwater for a second, then come back up, cough, then steady again. "How much longer?" she asked. I didn't have an answer. Then, all at once, the line went quiet. No gasp, no scream, just the faint sound of water and then nothing. I said her name several times. No response. The call timer kept counting for a few seconds before disconnecting on its own. I sat there, headset still on, staring at the empty screen. There were more calls waiting. I took them. That's what the job demands. But part of me stayed in that attic, in a city I wasn't in, with someone I couldn't reach. I left the 911 center a few months after Katrina. I went to counseling, like they recommended. The therapist told me people only have so much room inside for other people's emergencies. Maybe I hit my limit. I don't regret staying on that line, though. If I burned the last of my emotional fuel being there for her, it was worth it. I still don't know if she lived or died. I probably never will. But if I could go back, and the phone rang again with her on the other end, I'd answer every single time. I've been a police officer in the small coastal town of Bar Harbor, Maine, for 8 years. Most days are calm, lost tourists, parking complaints, the occasional bar fight. But there are calls that stay with you, quiet ones, without sirens or screaming. The ones where you see what people carry behind closed doors. This one started on a gray November morning, barely light outside, when a man walked into the station saying his wife was missing. He looked tired more than scared, the kind of tired that comes from something eating at you for a while. He said her name was Laura. She'd left the night before after an argument and hadn't returned. I took the report, tried to keep him talking details about where she might go, who she might call. He hesitated before every answer, like he was editing something. That hesitation is always a warning sign. I ran her name through our system. No recent arrests, no hospital intake, nothing. I told him we'd put out a local bulletin and asked him to stay home in case she came back. He nodded, eyes low. Something in his voice didn't match his face. After he left, I made a few calls: hospitals, highway patrol, neighboring departments. Nothing. I tried to shake the feeling that something about his story didn't fit. He said she'd left on foot, angry, without a coat. But the temperature had dropped below freezing overnight. Nobody walks far in that cold. I went to my sergeant, asked if I could drive out and check the house myself. He sighed, said fine, but to keep it simple. That's always code for don't make paperwork unless you have to. So I grabbed my flashlight and headed out. The house sat near the end of a quiet street, 2 stories, pale siding, the kind of place that looked peaceful until you got close. Mail piled in the box, a porch light still burning from the night before. He opened the door before I could knock twice, like he'd been waiting. The living room smelled faintly of old coffee and something metallic blood, or maybe just rust. I asked if I could take a look around. He said sure, almost relieved. That's when I knew he hadn't expected her to come home. Inside, everything was neat but tense, like a stage set after the audience left. 2 mugs on the counter, a blanket folded on the couch. I checked for signs she'd packed or taken anything missing: clothes, luggage, keys. Nothing. Then I saw her medication bottles lined up by the sink. Antidepressants, mood stabilizers, and an insulin kit. I asked him if she was diabetic. His face changed, all the color drained out of it. She left it all here, he said quietly. That was when I stopped thinking she was missing and started thinking we might be too late. I asked to check the bedroom. He just nodded. Upstairs, the air felt heavier, like the house itself didn't want me there. The bed was neatly made, too neatly. I lifted a pillow without knowing why, just instinct, and saw a folded sheet of paper underneath. I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. It wasn't a goodbye, it was an apology. She wrote that she didn't want to be a burden anymore, that she was tired of being the problem. She ended with a line that still echoes in my head. Please tell him not to look. I radioed the station, voice low, and reported a possible suicide note. My sergeant told me to stay put while they sent another unit. I didn't wait. I went back downstairs, where the husband sat at the kitchen table staring at nothing. I asked where she might go when she felt overwhelmed. Nowhere, he said. Then, softer, maybe the pier. She liked the water. That was all I needed. I left the house and drove fast toward the docks. Lights off, just the hum of the engine and the sound of my heart pounding against the door. The pier was almost empty. A gull screamed somewhere in the fog. Then I saw her small figure at the far end, standing near the railing, hands gripping the edge. I got out quietly, didn't use the radio. When I called her name, she turned, startled but calm. Her eyes were red but dry. I told her her husband was worried, that we just wanted to make sure she was safe. She said she didn't mean to cause trouble, she just wanted silence. Sometimes silence is the loudest cry for help. We sat on a bench while she cried quietly. I didn't tell her about the note. I just said people needed her, even when she couldn't feel it. After a while, she agreed to come with me. I called for medical support and drove her back myself. In the rearview mirror, she looked like someone waking up from a long dream. Before she got out of the car, she said, "You found me faster than I thought you would." I told her we try our best, but sometimes it's just luck and a little instinct. A few days later, she and her husband brought a small box of chocolates to the station with a thank you card. It didn't say much, just for your kindness. I kept that card in my locker for years. People think police work is about catching bad guys. Sometimes, it's just about finding someone in time and being there when the silence gets too loud. Every November, when the fog rolls in over the harbor, I think of Laura. Somewhere between the water and the sky, she decided to stay, and that's enough. I've worked as a sheriff's deputy in rural northern Georgia for over 15 years. Most nights are quiet speeding tickets, noise complaints, the occasional bar fight that ends with more apologies than punches. But every so often, there's a call that reminds you how far you are from help out here. When dispatch says, "welfare check," you never know what you're walking into. Could be an old man who fell asleep watching TV, or it could be the night you end up staring down a rifle barrel. This one started around 2 a.m., cold and clear, on a dirt road lined with pine. The dispatcher said a woman had called about her ex-husband. He'd been drinking again, hadn't answered her calls all day, and she was worried he might have hurt himself. The house was a few miles outside town, down a private road most GPS apps don't even recognize. Technically, the call should have gone to the on-duty sheriff, but he was an hour away covering another county line, so it was just me. Out here, that happens more often than people realize. One badge, one cruiser, and a lot of darkness. The dirt road turned into gravel, then into something barely passable. My headlights caught 2 rusted trucks parked beside a collapsing shed. The yard looked abandoned tires, broken tools, empty beer cans half buried in leaves. I turned off the engine and stepped out. The night was so still it felt staged. No crickets, no wind, Just silence heavy enough to hear my own breathing. I knocked on the front door, hard. No answer. Knocked again, louder. Nothing. I keyed the mic on my shoulder. Dispatch. No contact at residence. They told me to try the back. That's when the hair on my arm stood up. Before I could move, the radio crackled again, dispatch, saying the man had just called them directly. My stomach dropped. She said, "He's on the line right now." Then her voice changed. "He told us he's looking at you through the window." I froze. The beam from my flashlight swept across the dark glass panes of the living room window, nothing but my reflection. "He says he's holding his rifle," she added, "pointed right at the back of your head." For a few seconds, everything in me went silent. I didn't breathe, didn't blink, just turned slowly toward the tree line. The woods behind the house were thick and black, only patches of moonlight breaking through. I couldn't see anything. I whispered into my mic, "Advise him to put the gun down." Dispatch said he refused, said if I left right now, no one would get hurt. My pulse was loud in my ears. Training tells you to move to cover, but out there was no cover, just trees, shadows, and the feeling of being hunted. I started walking backward toward my cruiser, slow and steady. I didn't even dare turn the flashlight back on. Halfway to the cruiser, I heard something footsteps in the dirt behind me. Slow, deliberate. I stopped. The air felt sharp, like it could cut. Every instinct screamed to run, but running gets you killed faster. I whispered, "He's moving," into the radio. No reply. Static. Then a voice, not from the radio this time, a man's voice from the darkness. "You can leave now, deputy." Calm. Too calm. I didn't answer. Just reached for my sidearm, holding it low, scanning the trees. My flashlight beam caught nothing but empty air and the glint of frost on branches. I made it to the car, opened the door slowly, slid inside without slamming it, locked the doors. The radio came back to life with static, then dispatch's voice. "Units en route. Hold position." My hands were shaking just enough to make the keys rattle. I stared into the side mirror, expecting to see someone stepping out of the woods. Nothing. I waited, barely breathing, until the sound of another patrol car approached from the main road. Only then did I let my shoulders drop. The silence had weight again, but it was different. The kind that follows a near miss. When backup arrived, we searched the property together. Found no one. No footprints, no open doors, no sign of a gun. Inside the house, the phone was still off the hook. A single lamp lit the living room, casting everything in dull yellow. On the table was a half-empty whiskey bottle and a hunting rifle with the safety on. He'd been here, just not anymore. It was like he'd evaporated into the woods. We logged the scene, filed the report, did everything by the book, but that didn't make it easier to explain. Around sunrise, we got a call from the man himself. He'd driven into town and turned himself in at a nearby diner. Said he didn't mean to scare the deputy. Claimed he'd been drinking and wanted attention. Maybe that was true. Or maybe he'd realized how close he came to pulling the trigger. When I saw him later in cuffs, he wouldn't meet my eyes, just kept saying he didn't see anyone out there. That's the thing about nights like that sometimes. You can't tell which of you was really in control. People think police fear violence the most. But what really gets to you are the quiet moments, the sound of leaves moving when no wind's blowing, the voice that knows your name when no one's around. Every October when the air turns cold again, I remember that dirt road and the calm voice from the trees. Out here, backup can be 20 minutes away. But the darkness never leaves.